Welcome, everyone, back to Business, Bourbon, and Cigars. This is the podcast where we're exploring unconventional business practices. Sometimes we do it over a glass of bourbon, maybe a fine cigar. I'm your host, Scott Joseph, and today we have a special guest joining us, Brigham Dallas. Brigham's the founder and owner of Hello Sugar. It's a revolutionary Brazilian wax and sugaring franchise. It's based out of Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I got married. That's a nice, that's nice. With a unique, Hello Sugar's got a very unique technology-focused approach. I guess that's the way we should say it. Hello Sugar has become one of the best companies in the nation and one of the fastest growing franchises in the country. It's got an impressive 76 units in just its first 2 years. So I want you to join me in welcoming Brigham Dallas to the show as we dive into the world of Contrarian business practices that work. Brigham, it's great to have you here.
Scott, I really appreciate you having me on your show. I'm excited to get started with you.
First off, when we talk about a unique approach to Brazilian wax, you got to first explain to everybody, before we even introduce who you are and why we should be listening, right? What does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first off, the question I always get is, how did you land in the Brazilian waxing space? Like,
exactly.
I don't wax myself. I didn't even know what I swear to you, Scott, I didn't know what a Brazilian wax was when I got started. I had to go Google it like a month in, and I'm like, whoa, like this is not what I was thinking. And it was one of those things where just the numbers looked really good. Like we're doing waxes for $50 to $60 every 15 to 20 minutes in a room. And there's relatively high margins and low cost of goods or cost of service. So the financial data was like awesome. And then on top of that, I got women that want to be in careers and not jobs. They replace them more often. And the clients come back on a monthly basis. So there's high retention as well. So that for me checked all the boxes of why to get into Hello Sugar.
So talk to me, you started on a relatively low budget. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, what's amazing, before we get into that, let's first talk about you. All right. Okay. So what's your background before you even got into this? I think if you were to go out there and talk to people that either want to be entrepreneurs or even are entrepreneurs, the fact that the thought of like, I'm going to franchise this, and it just seems very complicated, right? I'm an entrepreneur, but I've never done a franchise model. I've never created a franchise. Mm-hmm. Talk to us, like, that seems daunting for a lot of people. Talk us through that.
Yeah, there's a path to franchising, and there's a very specific path to franchising. First, you have to have a business, you have to have one profitable, and you have to have it so self-efficient that you'll never have to work in that business again. So once you get to that point, you can look into franchising, and you probably should have multi-units. It shouldn't just be one unit, it should be multis. And then you're going to develop an entirely different company, aka franchise. It's going to take you a year to get to market. Your first year, you're going to spend all your time running everybody else's businesses and helping them succeed. And then hopefully, if you have proof of concept at that point, you can take that to a national scale. That's a very specific path for a franchise.
So I want to make sure I'm hearing this right. So you open up a couple stores all on your own. All right. Yep. Then you started, it sounds like you did, I don't want to say a real super formal. It almost sounds like an informal in the beginning stages, the early stages of a franchise type thing where you said, all right, I'll let you do this. Basically babysat them, whether it's in their locations, in their stores to make it. Was this all in Phoenix, by the way, at the time?
I started 5 years running Hello Sugars. So like salons in Phoenix, and I developed this, cool process. But Scott, like, you ran car dealerships. I'm sure, here's a good example of franchising. Like your house. Are you a clean guy, Scott?
Oh, yes,
Would you say you're relatively clean?
I'm very clean.
Personal here.
I'm not only clean, just like in picking up and having everything's got a spot.
Yeah.
And then hygiene. I'm a clean across the board in every aspect.
Let's go. Okay. I'm not that way, but I appreciate somebody that is. And my wife would certainly appreciate if I were like you. So that's cool. But for me, like I'll keep, the dishes clean, but there might be a dish in the sink, right? But if somebody comes over to my house, I'm vacuuming in the corners. I'm scrubbing the sink. Everything's kind of just like really put away. And that's the best way I could describe franchising. When you get into a franchise, the franchisee is going to be like, hey, do you have a system for how you do X, Y, and Z? And you're like, no. And then you got to go and build that system. And you got to do that for literally every part of your business, even the things that, because remember, you're 5-6 years ahead of them. Even the things that to you seem very primitive, you got to go and restructure and build. And then you got to be able to do that at scale. And so what happens that first year is you do this deep clean of your business and you start to just organize everything a little bit better. Everything's a little sharper. And your business, because of that, starts to succeed at a much higher level. So I grew a ton in Arizona because of the franchising. Back to your question, though. So, you're asking, like, how did we do that first year? So I paid for the first 2 franchisees to get started, one in Arizona, one in Tucson. They knocked it out of the water. They did extremely well. 3 months later, I was like, this is easy. So I went to my 2 like really close friends and I was like, you guys franchise and I'll do it with you. I'll pick a market and you 2 pick a market and we'll just figure it out, because this first year, your growth is a lot like an inverted hockey stick. It's super slow until you get proof of concept and then you start growing. That's the way to do it. Because what happens in franchising, it's a lot like stocks. Stocks, you can like see the Schedule K. It's like a public document. All the finances are online. It's the same thing in franchising. We have an item 19 in the FDD that tells like all of the financials of all of our units. And so in the beginning year, everyone's going to ask the question, did your first unit succeed? And if they didn't succeed, you're dead in the water. So that's why you got to go super slow at first and then do it with them. So I went out and built my own franchise in Nashville, Tennessee. They built theirs in Houston and Idaho. Just they had connections to those areas. And we just went to town and we had no idea what we were doing. It was totally different than Phoenix. There's so many problems that we had that I didn't even realize what happened. And the first year was absolutely miserable because my friends are like failing at a business that they invested their life savings in that they trusted me for. So lots of like late nights trying to figure things out, like trying different hypotheses on like what's going to work, what's not. And about 6 to 8 months in, it turned a corner and everyone started growing really well.
What happened? Why?
We had some false hypotheses. So some of them were how many people to hire. You hire too few and you might be dead in the water because you gotta retrain and you gotta close to retrain. You hire too many and you have what's called hourly wage difference. So basically the difference between what you tell them you're going to pay them and what they're earning off commission, you got to pay that difference. And so we're running up high bills there. We tried to put the hourly wage too high in the beginning. We opened 2 rooms in a small studio instead of 1, starting small. And then figuring out the advertising piece was a huge piece of that as well.
I need to introduce you to a few different people. So I love, for one, recently we just had John Hewitt on the show. So from Jackson Hewitt, Liberty Tax.
Let's go.
So
cool.
He's now on his 3rd franchise that he's building, which he's saying is outpacing both of those, and both of those combined up over 11,000 stores. By the time that's what I'm saying. So that's one end, right? That's where you're working towards and we'll get to. But then I have another one that could benefit from you because they're 2 years behind you, right? Yeah. They're at the very early stage, just starting out with this franchise. And so they're going through that path, right? So one guy I could introduce you to kind of be like, all right, you're already here. This is what it's going to take you to get here, here, and here. But then I think you could pay it forward with the other group. So I'll introduce you. I'll introduce you to both of them sometime later today. But I love connecting people. I love your story too about I want to tell the audience what you started this with.
$3,000.
I love that. I started my company with 12. All right. So, I had a 4 times advantage over you. So, but what I love about that is everybody thinks you need all this money to start something. So how with $3,000 did you build this to where it is today?
Yeah, great question. And today we're at 81 doors open and Arizona's doing close to 10 million in revenue. I've got 6 friends when I was in my 20s, all of them multimillionaires, all of them high school or college dropouts. And you wonder why that dynamic happened that way. Maybe I'm just gravitated entrepreneurs, but maybe what it is you get put in this corner where you don't have a choice. you have to make it. You're a high school dropout. You got McDonald's,
Yeah.
or you figure it out, right? Like there's this like, I've got to figure this out. And so for the audience that's thinking, man, should I quit my job and do this entrepreneurial thing? I've got $100,000 job a year. That's a tough thing to like do when it's so padded on the other side. But for the person like me at this time, I was traveling. So I was living abroad, doing my thing, going to different places, working on digital ads, making not very much money. And then when I came back to the States, I just wanted to get out of that business. And so I was like, okay, I've got not a lot of money, but like I've got a couple of like connections. I had a friend who was a plastic surgeon. He had a room in the back of his office. So I had a place I could start. And I just put up a website. I ran Groupon, and I just started handing out flyers on cars and everything. And that first year we did 65,000 in revenue. It wasn't a lot for a salon. That's not a lot of money. Typical salons do about $1 million when they're mature. But then the next year I've opened a second room in a different location. And I've then built my first flagship out of that. I took all my money I had, like literally every penny saved, every piece of debt I could get, and opened a brand new store. And it was $100,000, which today would have cost me $400,000 if I did it again. And so we did proof of concept that first 6 months. And I went through everything, Scott. I mean, we tried like an ultimate package like European does. We tried a full body membership, like just trying to really figure out what we needed to be as a company. I tried different marketings. Like I tried to be the high fashion group. I tried to be the go to the beach group, and then landed on, and this is kind of funny. I once put this ad on of this voluptuous girl, like she's in a bikini, very, very curvy, like bigger girl. And it got 3 times the engagement of the other like fashion and beach. I was like, that's it, man. Like I spent like $50 trying to figure this out. And a big marketing firm would have spent like 10,000 with them. I just put it on Facebook, and 3 times engagement. Okay, that's going to be our brand. And so then we started using curvy women and bigger girls, and the comments were like, I love that you appeal to my audience, my people. And I found our tribe, and so that's how it started. $3,000 back to a plastic surgeon's office, hired a trainer to come in, teach the people and teach the person. We had one esthetician at a time, and grew it from there.
So we discussed earlier how I'm anal about different things and just very picky. In my own companies, I'm pretty much the policeman when it comes to, brand identity, brand protection. When it comes to the brand standards and guidelines, it is a pet peeve of mine when people misuse the logo, don't use the right fonts, don't position things the way they're supposed, all that stuff. With 81? I heard that right?
Open, yeah.
Yeah. So 81 locations all spread around the country, right? You're outside of the U.S., correct?
Only in the United States.
Okay. Only in the U.S. right now. So how do you manage that?
Yeah.
That would be the part that drives me the most crazy.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've had people go off brand, trying to use different waxes or trying to, design things in their own ways and stuff. And it's like, what are you doing, right? Like you've got a model, the model works, like just follow the model, right? The biggest one that scares me the most is advertising. So that's like the face of the company, right? And so we don't allow our franchisees to do any digital advertising, mainly because it could force us into, and I call these existential threats. Existential is like kills your existence, right? Yep. And so an existential threat would be, they put a vagina on a Facebook ad and it becomes pornographic. And now everything associated with that pixel and that website now gets shut down. So then our real heavy good ads also get shut down. So that's why we block all franchisees from doing their own advertising. And I think that controls the majority of, issues that might show up.
I think we're allowed to say vagina. I don't know. I mean, I know in your world you're allowed to say it. But I'm wondering, is Apple going to be like, hey, he's used the word porn and he's used the word vagina. We're going to flag that. We can't push that. No, I don't know.
We'll say the V word. We'll give the V word next time.
Hey, how much research? So you touched on it a little bit in at the very beginning. How much research You talked about the numbers look good. How much research did you actually put in before you said, I'm just doing it?
Dude, you know what? Like I think most successful made it kind of people make it seem like they're geniuses and they figured it, and they didn't know all these. Mine was
Yeah.
more gut, man. I was like, so I was talking to this girl and she was an esthetician, is someone who waxes. And she said, she was just complaining. She was like, man, I had to pay like 20,000 in taxes last year. And I'm like, $20,000 in taxes? Like, how much money do you make? Like, holy crap. Like, I was like blown away, 26-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I think I've made like 105,000. And I'm like, you made $105,000 waxing? And I'm thinking it's more like, I don't know, like a hairstylist. Like I didn't know they made a lot of money doing this, right? But she like ran me through the numbers. She's like, I make $45 an appointment. I do 4 an hour. And I'm like, you're making more than a lawyer. Like what is this business, right? And so
I want to know. I first want to know how she only paid 20 on 100-something thousand.
Who knows? Yeah. Seriously, you get that. He was listening to the podcast. He's like, let me talk to that tax accountant. Yeah. So, anyways, she just kind of sold me on that idea. I was just like really blown away by that, and I started. And then there's a lot of other things where like once I got into the business, I'm like, oh, I really like this. But I don't think I was that smart, Scott. Like I think what I know now, 10 years into doing business, I could tell you and articulate it a lot better. But it was a lot of just gut feeling. And the other thing, Scott, is I had this business from the time I had the idea, it was January 5th. I had an open salon March 29th. So it was less than 3 months getting the LLC, getting the training, the website, getting everything up. I mean, speed to market was so important. And I just said, you know what? I'm spending $3,000. Like, what's literally the worst that can happen? I'm not going to deliberate over this for years. If it fails, I'm a smart guy. I'll just pick another idea and run with that until I figure it out.
I did a lot of training early in my life and career with Tony Robbins. He says 0 is not the bottom. You can go way below it, is what he told me.
Yeah.
But hey, you got to have the mindset you had, right? Successful entrepreneurs have that. And I think you almost have to be willing to take those chances and take the risks. I love that you did it so young too. I did something similar. You mentioned you could either make it or work at McDonald's. And here's my story. First off, my first job was at McDonald's. That lasted 2 weeks, and then I figured out how to make it. So I was the exact example of what you just gave. So, talk to me about some of the early challenges that you think a lot of other entrepreneurs either encounter or face, and how did you deal with them and overcome them?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. There's phases to business, and there's always a challenge in business. So I used to think when I get over this hurdle, everything's going to be okay. Yeah. And now I know that there's just a different hurdle. You're always going to have this stress. And if you're not okay and comfortable with that stress, then you're not going to like succeed in this. And I look at this with my current franchisees who are entrepreneurs, and I'm basically a mentor for entrepreneurs at this point. And the ones that really get it are the ones that are able to pivot, test the hypotheses, and then if that doesn't work, go to a different hypothesis, test that, and keep on building, right? And those are the ones that it's just natural for them. They're not uncomfortable. They're more uncomfortable with where they're at than they are with changing. And those are the people that really make it in this. And so for me, I see a business like a baby. The baby grows to a toddler to, and in each stage is correlated directly with the number of people in the company. And so, the biggest challenges we had in the beginning were like, find our identity. Who are we? Yeah. Are we male? Are we female? Are we a loud person? Like, are we tiny? Like, find that cultural identity. And then you really stick to that identity through the toddler phase, which is like 5 to 10 employees. You know everybody. And then from 10 to 30 employees, it's like, how do I build systems? Because that 30th employee doesn't know me like the second or third employee does. So how do they know the company and have that same adoption and brainwashing to some degree? That's not the right word, but like putting them into the system and perfectly understanding Hello Sugar's culture became a system kind of thing. And I think at 30 employees, and this is what I saw, I had to let go of my manager. This is like a stage of business. And Scott, I don't know if you experience this, but you outgrow your manager. And
Yep.
that's so tough for a CEO to do
Yep.
because you just built the first 5 years of a company with them and they weren't what you needed for that next level. That is, I think, one of the hardest things for entrepreneurs. Like, really good CEOs are able to say, I'm going to put the business first, even though it means killing a relationship that was somewhat family to me.
So I've got similar situations where you outgrow people that helped you get to certain levels, and what you're describing, you're spot on. The once you start realizing, oh, I've got this one or two people doing all the work in production. They're staying up and staying in the office till 2 and 3 just to do whatever it takes to get it done and get it done accurately and on time. You don't have processes. The type of process, none of that mattered when you had 5 people because everything was so small. Everything looked like it worked, right? You were winging it. But as it grows and it starts to scale, I think a lot of people hit that wall. They don't know how to scale it. They don't know how to do the processes. And so I got 2 questions. I want to first go into the second question is going to be, who helped you with the processes? But I want to come back to that. I just said that just so I wouldn't forget it. Okay. All right. So my first question goes back to what you just said. You had to let someone go. And I think every entrepreneur at some stage has had to do that because they outgrew them. I always look back though, because the people that I had to do that with, they clearly, there was behaviors that I loved. You grow in it with them. So clearly at some point, they're willing to go through all the crap that you got to go through to help you build this, right? There's a loyalty to that, right? That's what makes it difficult of replacing them. And I always wonder for myself, did I not push them enough, or was I not clear enough with them to explain where we really wanted to go and the skill sets they were going to have to, because I didn't have the skills either. I had to learn them, right? And I did what I had to do to understand, either to meet up with people that could help me, or really learn that, all right, this is what process improvement is. This is what continuous improvement's all about. Kaizen, all this other stuff that Six Sigma, you have to learn all that stuff. Was I not clear enough in painting a path, or making that vision clear to them to where they wanted to do it? Or was it just on them? I don't know. Do you ever look at yourself and wonder, could I have done more with that person?
No. I don't have that like qualm. I think the qualm that I have is like, this person trusted me. They trusted me with their livelihood, with their pay for their family. They just bought a house. And now I've got to make a business decision that, And so like the first decision you have to make with every employee is, do they fit the culture? More than, are they a good performer? Oh, yeah. And then the second decision is, do they have the ability to do this job? Right. And I think that's kind of what we're going at. My wife and I, we get into we have some friends that let her down sometimes. Like, they might eat all her food at something and it just seems like rude or something. Or like we go on walks and like the dogs, like they take all the water for the dog, like stupid things like this. And she's like, I can't believe this person did it. She's like so like upset about this. And I'm like, Emma, look, you are thinking this is an A-class player. This is a C-class person. Don't expect A-class results from a C-class person. Like you've got to just like bucket this as like, that's a C-class person. Like they're going to do stuff like this. And I think with employees, you have to have, as a CEO, you have to develop the ability to say, this is outside of their scope and ability. And I think the thing that really drives that for me is people are really good at some things, but the things that they're not good at, they tend to just avoid, right? Like I'm not a good organizer, so I just don't organize that well. And I just kind of avoid it. And I'll just like play to my strengths. So like a typical CEO at 30 people, they're going to want, that goes from like 20 to 30. They're just want to spend all their time talking to people, right? Because that's what you do at 20 person unit, right? Yep. But then really what you need is reports, you need structure, you need organizational things, and you need to put people in places to talk. And so I always got this, like, I'm too busy. That was like a big sign for me that like that person was it was outgrowing that person, right? I'm too
Yep.
busy. I'm spending all my time, and I'm like, they don't know what to do at this stage, and they probably don't have the ability. And like you said, maybe there is some training, maybe there's some adapting, but a lot of that, man, it's just sixth sense. Like you either got it or it's like an ability. I'm never going to be a professional athlete, right? Like,
I'm always shocked by business leaders who value how much time someone puts into the job. I always throw out this scenario to them, and don't get me wrong, I do appreciate that, right? When someone's busting their butt and working hard and producing, and this is the key, producing more work than the person that works the 40 hours, I love it. But when someone's got to work 60 hours a week to do what someone else is getting done in 40 or less, I value the person that's getting it done in 40 or less more.
It's costing you less money.
Exactly. And so they're just better at it. They're more efficient at it. They're finding ways to that's the type of mindset that I want in my companies. Right. And so, but I don't know if some people, their value systems are so much on like, wow, this guy's time, who cares? I just look at results.
I love that.
So, we kind of glossed over this. So I'm going to go back a couple years when you're starting, right? All right.
Yeah.
You're sitting there thinking, all right, I'm going to do this, but there's waxing companies there's salons that do this all over the world. I would think this is a red ocean. Everybody's doing this. So talk to me about what makes this different. What makes this franchise different, especially from a client experience part?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to go back to, I look really smart now, but I wasn't that smart then, right? Like that's how I think a lot of business owners hit. So I can tell you exactly who we are in our identity, but I didn't know it at the time. I didn't even know how big the market was. I mean, speed to market in 3 months, you're just putting it up and seeing if it works. My thought was, if I can make $5,000 a month, I'd be happy with this business, because that's what I needed to live at the time. And so at the time, the first thing we figured out is I looked at all of the reviews of all my competitors, and I looked at the negatives and the positives. The negatives were easy. It's like, they hurt me, they missed hair, etc. But the positives are the ones I really was focusing on. And the thing that came up the most, like if you did a word density cloud, the word that came up the most was comfortable. She makes me feel comfortable. And that goes back to like the larger women, because like you're naked on the table, you're very vulnerable, right? I thought maybe we hire like the supermodels, right? No, that's like the exact opposite thing. Don't do that, stupid, right? You want women that like are unassuming, that just help you feel comfortable when you come in the room. Like you don't look at them and be like, crap, she's going to be judging me when she looks at me naked, right? You want the woman that just like, hey, welcomes you. It's the type of person you want to give a hug to, right? Like that comfort is what we started focusing on the brand early on. And then, recently, like in the past 2 years, I had this idea. Like I looked at all my competitors. European wax, their thing is the special wax. It's a feature, right? What's the benefit of the special wax? Radiant waxing, speed waxing. They get it done really fast. That's a feature. What's the benefit of speed? Another place is sugaring. Again, that's a feature. What's the benefit of these things? And all of them were skirting on this idea. They just weren't saying it. Because like, what is the real benefit of these things? They make it hurt less. If you have a special wax, it's not going to hurt as bad. If you're fast at waxing, you're done quicker, right? Just get it over with.
I was going to say, I can promise you, if I was on a wax table, all right, which I've never been, but if I was on a wax table, I wouldn't care what the person looked like. My only thought was going to be like, oh, this was a big mistake. This is going to hurt. This is going to hurt. So I that's what I was going at, because I figured, my God, if I was going to do, I would look to find the one that's the most comfortable and the doesn't hurt as bad, right? I don't know how I don't know how women do this.
Yeah. How are you scared of a spider, but you go and put boiling wax, hot wax on your body? Like makes no sense to me logically, right? Like, and so, this is like a big tip for businesses. If you're going to position yourself in the market, position on the benefits and not the features. The feature is the wax. The benefit is that it hurts less. And so what we did is we came out, it says, hello, sugar, it hurts less here. And here positions us against the competitors. And I think that was really brilliant and helped our brand a lot. So in every room, in every marketing material, it says it hurts less here. And that's how we position ourselves. So we do both sugaring and waxing. Sugaring is a form of organic hair removal. It depends on your skin, what's better for you. And, we're going to find the right product for your skin. And then we have a 50-point pain management certification that every esthetician goes through before they're able to wax. And they get graded every year to make sure that they hit those standards of care. And so we can really tell people, like, when you come in here, it's going to hurt less than any of our competitors.
You know what you did that was really genius? You looked at your reviews.
Yeah.
So many. I don't want to let that go without talking about that. So many businesses really struggle. You listen to people like Donald Miller and his whole brand and niche is you got to have a clear message, right? Marketing made simple, and it's all about the clarity of the message and making sure you're speaking to that avatar, to that ideal client. But man, there's no better source to figure out what they want and what they want to avoid than your own reviews.
Yeah.
And not only are you learning exactly what they want to go towards and what they want to move away from, all right, towards pleasure, away from pain, but you're actually learning the language, the exact words they use to describe it. So you can speak in their language, even
in their words.
It's beautiful.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Did you learn that, or did that just happen?
Again, that's a gut feeling. It's like, what are other people saying about this, right? But, I've had like phases of review knowledge. Okay. So first off was what we talked about there. It's like, figure out the reviews, figure out the language, figure out the culture. And then there's this other like next phase where it was, and then put in processes for negatives. Like, how do you fix those things? There was a salon in the franchise that had 150 5-star reviews. They were ranked like 4.9 on Google. Amazing salon, failing miserably. They weren't good at selling. And the owner kept coming back to me and saying, we have all these good reviews. Why would I fire my team? And I'm like, because they don't sell. And we had this like battle back and forth. Like, do reviews equate to performance? And I learned very quickly, no. Just because you're really high reviews, there's probably people that just aren't saying anything. And these people are still not rebooking people and getting it back in the salon. So that was like the second aha moment. And then the third aha moment is, and this is like the next level of reviews, is secret shoppers. I have a big team of secret shoppers. And it's kind of like the idea of like, I'm going to drive down the highway. I want to speed, but I know there might be a cop, so I'm not going to speed. Right? Like that's kind of the mentality of secret shoppers. So my team all knows they have secret shoppers shopping them.
Right.
So they're not going to screw up because of the off chance that this is really going to affect their career. And so from the secret shoppers, I was talking to one and she's like, oh, I just go book at one of my 14 salons. And she's like, I was going to do the one right by the house, but it had no reviews. So then I went to this other one and the reviews there were poor. And so I went to this one in Tempe that had good reviews. And I was like, what in the hell are you talking about? I've got 140 Google 5-star reviews in the one right by your house. What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, there's no reviews. And then I was like, show me. And she pulls up her maps and she's using Apple Maps, which I don't know about you. I freaking just hate Apple Maps. Like
I agree.
And all the reviews are tied to Yelp. And the Yelp, we had like 4 reviews, right, at this location. And so then I had this aha moment of like, I can't just be good on Google. I have to be good on Yelp. And Yelp sucks because you can't solicit reviews. You can't get people to go and do it. And there's this whole crowd of people that don't even use the system that I thought everybody used. And she's like a Gen Z. Like, so it's like, what? Like, you're using Yelp? Like, I thought this was like antiquated. Why is Apple using Yelp? Like this was crazy to me.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. So, in one area, scaling up, hiring employees, the right employees, by franchising, you've somewhat reduced that headache. But at the same time, your brand and your overall business, who these franchisees hire, not only is it critical for their success, but overall, from a brand experience and client experience, it's very important to you. How do you manage that? How do you know? Walk us through that process?
Yeah. I'm going to give you the analogy of horse racing. So in horse racing, there are horses that will never win races. And
Yeah.
there's that black stallion that wins every race. Do you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about? Like,
Oh yeah.
and let's say you're a betting person. And in horse racing, like the black stallion doesn't have good odds, but the, one that never wins races has really good odds, right? And so, if you put $1 on that, you might win 100. But in the world of hiring, like let's assume that this analogy applies to hiring, every single horse that you bet on costs the same amount. So if you could figure out who the black stallion is and you could just bet on them every time, your probability of winning increases dramatically, right? You're going to
Yeah.
win a lot more often. And the figuring out who the black stallion is directly correlated to personality performance of the person. So you have to do personality tests. You have to. Like if you're
Yep.
not doing that in your business, you're not figuring something out. So we pay, I think it's like $12K a year for predictive index. Predictive index is a personality test for hiring. And what we did was we got the test. We have 100 employees, and we went through and we got everyone to do the test. And we said, okay, out of these employees that are artisans, would I hire them again? And the answer was 1 in 8. And then I looked at altruists, and these are their types. Think artisan is a scientist, not very friendly, kind of shy, not very talkative, but very precise. Okay.
Yeah.
That's an artisan. An altruist is Mother Teresa. She's your best friend the minute you walk in the room. She's non-judgmental. She's not like a super sharky salesperson, but she's going to care a ton about you, and she's highly precise as well. Like, I mean, it's obvious, right? Who you want as as a waxer, but those type of things don't always come out in a first interview, but they really come out in a personality test. And it turned out that 7 out of 8 of the altruists that we hired, they were top quartile performers, right? And so if we could just hire and interview altruists, like I'll take those all day long, right? And so now we do personality tests. I pay $12,000 a year for it, but if I train one person, it costs me $2K. So if I could hire 6 people better a year, then this is like a no-brainer, absolutely worth it. And I'm hiring like 8 people a month right now. So like it makes sense to do something like this.
You're part of we have a member in our Me Plus Ultra mastermind group that does these tests. I'm going to introduce you. It's a third person I'm introducing you to now. So you're going to not be able to keep up with your emails from after this show with all the introductions. But that made me think of something when you started talking about personality tests. It's equally as important for you when you're interviewing potential new franchisees.
Yeah.
I would imagine you're not just sitting there approved. I mean,
yeah. The reality is, and this is a 10-year marriage on franchising. It's a 10-year marriage. It's got to be right. And the thing that scares me the most is I don't know the right personality yet. I mean, with 100 employees and lots of turnover, I can tell you these are the types we want to hire. With franchising, I can take the data from other companies and say these are the types that other people think are right. But to be honest, like with 81 doors open and 25 franchisees, I'm starting to get that picture now, but it's just forming in my mind of who they are.
My guy might be able to help you with that because he's got a database on. I'm dead serious on this. That's what his niche is on CEOs and I'll introduce you and let you guys figure out if it makes sense. But when you're seeing this, that shot right into my head, and I'm thinking like, man, you bring in the wrong person. You sell that has the franchise. Well, heck, that person's not going to hire well. And that can have an immediate impact on your brand. So that's important.
In the beginning, 2 to 3 years, it's all like, let's figure it out. In the Dunkin' Donuts stage, it's like follow the system to an exact T. And so the personality might change depending on what stage you're in the franchising as well.
Well, but you also have an interesting, when I was looking at you and doing my research, interesting onboarding situation. Like you don't just sit there and have someone. You almost go through this stage of proof of concept with them. Did I see that correctly? All right. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So with Hello Sugar, what's unique is like a typical salon or franchise in general, you're going to get a loan for the SBA. The SBA is going to, require you to put 10% down. So you're going to put like $50K down. You're going to have a $500,000 loan with the SBA. It's a 10-year loan. You're going to spend a year of your life building a location. And then it takes about a year to figure out if it's going to work. So you just invested $500,000 in 2 years of your life betting on that horse that you don't
Yeah.
know really is going to work. And the franchisor is incentivized by doors, right? They take a royalty, they don't take a profit, right? So
Right.
they want the door open. And so they might not be just, if you're like, yeah, let's do this location. Some franchisors might be like, yeah, just do the location. Let's just figure it out. Like, whatever, it's your money, right? I don't love that, right? I don't think I would do that myself. So I didn't want to build something like that. And so what we do is we open a salon suite. There's these salon suite businesses that are coming up everywhere. They're 50 doors. They're all unique private barber owners, and they pay weekly. So it's like $250, $300 a week. And so you can put a business inside of there. Then we do all the advertising to drive money to that. And by the week they open, they're fully booked. Like, we do all the advertising on the back end to get there. And, so it costs $60,000 to get you up and running, profitable, usually in like 4 to 6 months, usually 4 months for profitability, and then grow from there. And so by the time you start your flagship, let's say you open 2 of these, you're a year in, you've got 2 locations producing profit enough to pay your rents at the new location, and you've picked the best location to start in. And you've done proof of concept for relatively small amounts compared to the $500,000 you would spend and not even know if it's going to work. And so when I build a location, I'm not scared to build the flagship, the big 4-room box next to a grocery store, because I've already proved the concept on the smaller ones.
Right. No, I love it. Talk to me about client retention. What kind of processes? Because I know you got a little bit of a marketing background as well. You've mentioned that. And it's not all about marketing. I mean, it's a lot about client experience as well. That whole process. How easy was it to book appointments? How was it when I actually showed up? And then the follow up and the nurturing of that. Like, what do you guys do to retain clients? What's some of your best programs?
Yeah, and we're 8 years in, and I still feel like a baby in a lot of ways. So I'll give you some vulnerable details. Again, like, I'm not that bright, but like, we're figuring it out. So like last year, our focus was education, because it was building a world-class education system. And, we could talk about that, but that's another day.
Yep.
And this year it's all about retention and trying to figure out retention. So I started reading books on retention, started like talking to mentors about these kind of things and trying to figure it out. And it's really tough, but there's a specific metric that's important for retention called a churn rate. Now, software uses this, and churn rate means how many people leave this month as a proportion of how many you have. So let's say you have 2 people in the system and your monthly churn was 50%. So let's say you find no new clients. So you churn your clients every 2 months. So the first month, 50% leaves, so that one person leaves. And the second month, the second of the 50% leaves. And now in 2 months, you have churn. So 50% is 1/2, and then you just reverse the numbers, and that's how many months you last. So if you're at 10% churn rate, 1/10, your people are lasting 10 months. And after 10 months, you're a completely new audience, right? So when we talk about retention, if we really want to get to the point of like knowing if things are going to work, you have to know your churn rate. How fast are you churning clients in your business? So that's the first thing we figured out. And we're at a 5 to 6x month return. So you take that and you multiply it by the cost of a service, which is $65. So we're at about $365 of revenue per client that signs up for a membership.
Nice.
And then we can see how much it's costing us to get somebody in the door and how much we're spending and saying, all those things. So then it's like, okay, so now that we have the data on churn, let's figure out how to improve churn. And so then we started saying, okay, how do we add just a massive amount of value to the company? And we did a retreat like a couple weeks ago and started working on this. So here's what we came up with. One is a loyalty program. And so, habits are created after the 3rd time. So if somebody comes in 3 times with us, then that's like the demarcation of, they're going to build a habit at that point. So getting them in the door the 3rd time, the science behind this is I want to give them something really, really good to get them in the 3rd time. So you come in the first time, you get a free bikini wax. You upsell to a Brazilian for $20. Cool. $20, I'm getting a Brazilian wax. The second time you come in, you're like, do I like this or whatever? Let's try it again. The 3rd time that you come in, I'm going to give you a free $25 value underarm wax. It's free, just to get you in the door the 3rd time. That's going to create a habit. And then there's a loyalty program that every 6th, 9th, 12th time, so every 3rd time you come in, we're going to give you something else for free that doesn't cost us a ton of money, but adds value to your service. And the second thing we're doing for retention, this is newer too, is we're becoming a loss leader. Costco does the $7 chicken, the $3 hot dogs, like massive hot dogs. They don't make any money on that. It's a loss leader for them. They lose money on it. $5 Domino's, the milk in the back of Walmart for like less than they pay or at cost. These are loss leaders for these businesses. And so at Hello Sugar, we're introducing in like 5 days, like in March, we're going to introduce the $5 underarm for members. So members can get underarms where there was $20 for a membership. It's now $5. So we're making $0 on this. But the idea is, hey, I could go to European Wax and pay about the same as Hello Sugar, but I don't get a $5 underarm there. And
Right.
so that's the idea is hopefully that's going to increase retention. So if we have this conversation again in a year, I hope to say that because of these efforts, we're able to have a churn rate at eight or 9 instead of 5 on the average for the salons, or 6.
You talk a lot about gut, and I do believe you, but you're using a lot of data too, and I love that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And as things start to get processed out, and you get a little bit more organized, and you're growing to where you're at now, that data becomes critical. So you're making some of the right decisions. Talk to me a little bit. Share an example, because I know we've got about 5 minutes left here.
Yeah.
And I want to share an example of a contrarian business practice that you implemented at Hello Sugar that yielded significant results.
Yeah. So contrarian business practice means a business practice where like everyone else thinks it's crazy, but you just go for it anyway. And the one that I got so much was reception. So everyone told me if you get rid of reception, this is like a thing in salons that you have to have. I mean, you're a high-end salon, like you need customer service, like you need high retention, and you have to have reception in the salons. But I started looking at this and I'm like, okay, these are part-time employees, typically going to school, making minimum wage. They don't care about their job because it's a job, not a career. And they're the ones having to sell the memberships and rebook people. And so there's this pass off from the esthetician to the receptionist, and it doesn't work very well. And so let's just get rid of them. And everyone was like, no, you can't do that. You're crazy. But I just did it anyway. And we got rid of reception. And instead I invested in like overseas workers to handle all of our tickets. And then I trained our estheticians on how to check out. And in that process, it completely like fixed everything. Like we went from, we saved $350,000 a year on reception, and there's no pass off. So our retention and sales of memberships went up crazy, because it's a lot harder to tell the person that just saw you naked on the table no than it is to tell a minimum wage employee that's 16 years old working at the front desk no, right? And so like this pass off was like genius, and everyone thought I was crazy doing this. And they're like, no, you can't do that. It's bad. And like, I'm like, no, we got an iPad. If you come to Hello Sugar, you're going to see check in here. There's an iPad, and that's how you check in.
You know what? I just did that at I just went golfing, and so I finally got to play Pebble Beach, and so
Nice.
I was walking it for like 4 days. So I started it in January. So I haven't played in like 4 months, right? So I started going to a golf rehab type thing, stretching and working all these different things. And the check-in process was a kiosk. I literally went there, check.
Wow.
It was just it was seamless, and it was fast. I loved it. They had people at the front, but I never had to talk to them. So just went right in, and then my therapist or whatever came out and got me, and that was the end of it.
I love it.
So talk to us, like what's next for Hello Sugar? What's on the horizon? What's the next couple of years look like for you guys?
So I'm 36, and I look at myself back at like 26. And it's like, what would you do differently, right? Like, how would you? And I learned this in the past year, the value of private equity and capital calls. Capital calls meaning raising money for projects. Yeah. And I used to think, no, you're giving up equity. That's a bad thing. You shouldn't do that. But I look at my like growth over those first 5 years, and money was tight for me. Like I was spending literally everything I made to build salons and pay them off as fast as possible, not to have debt. And, there's this anxiety of like debt hanging over your heads. And like, so like I would like, even like buying an appetizer at lunch or dinner, I'm like, I can't afford that, and I'm making good money, but got all this debt. Right. And so there's this really cool world where you can find investors. And I think people just in general are bad at making deals. Would you agree with that? Like people are just bad at knowing how to create win-win scenarios for people and mastering deals. Yeah. But there's a scenario where like people have a ton of money. I used to think capital was a scarce resource. It's not. Like good
Yep.
ideas, there's tons of capital for it.
Yep.
And they just don't know how to deploy it in a good way, right? They need good ideas to deploy it. And there's a situation where if you can find a TAM, a total addressable market, that's large enough that like if you were on your own could do like maybe 1 or 2 units, but with investment you could do like 10, then it absolutely makes sense to give up some equity because the pie is so much bigger. But the other thing about this that like I didn't realize at the time was those first 5 years, if I capital called all of this, like if I used like equity to build this, like by giving up equity, that whole time, the equity that I'm keeping, like let's say it's 60-40, if I'm taking 60%, I'm living off of that. I'm not having to pay down debts. I'm not having to invest in more business. So those first 5 years, I could have been living on 60% of those profits and reinvested that in other things and grew faster than if I just did it on my own. And so you're asking me like what years, the next 5 years looks like. I read a book about raising private money legally and learning the art of the deal, not Trump's thing, but the art of like a financial deal and structuring them. And I'm creating win-win scenarios for capital calls for investors. That's what I want to do, like with Hello Sugar.
That's awesome. Well, listen, one of my biggest regrets, if I look at so if I'm, been in the business world 33 years, the first 20 years, I was all about just competing. Our tagline literally was move the crowd, crush the competition, count the money. And so, but it was all isolated. And instead of being good at working and building my network and building strong relationships and building these strategic alliances and things could have happened so much faster and probably been a lot more enjoyable because I would have been sharing in that process. So I love hearing you say that. So first off, for people that might be, listen, if there might be people watching this show that say, hey, I'm interested in a franchise. How do they find you? How do they find information?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Scott. So Hello Sugar is a Brazilian wax and sugaring salon, 81 doors. We're going to be close to 150 this year, fastest growing salon franchise in the nation. And the numbers are good, $60,000 to invest to produce a salon that's averaging 65,000 return a year. And then build those into a flagship where you're doing 150 to 250,000 profit. All these numbers are verified through third-party audited financials. None of this is like, you got a chance to make this kind of money. These are averages. And and we automate the whole system. So it takes, less than 10 hours a week to work it. So it's a really cool business. If you're interested, just Google Hello Sugar franchise and you'll find us like on there and sign up for an appointment to learn more. In franchising, there's no sale. It's not like a car sale where you like, no offense, Scott. It's not like a car sale where you sell the car and then it's like completely like done with the relationship. There's no selling in franchising.
Hey, my dealerships aren't done with the relationship.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. Yeah. In franchising though, you're there forever, right? Like you're a 10-year relationship. So there's no, like, we want there to be radical transparency. All the cobwebs need to come out in the business because we want no aha gotcha moments. Like you're married to the person. So that's like the low pressure thing that's cool about franchising. Hit us up if you're interested. Google Hello Sugar franchising. You'll find us. Perfect.
Well, I want to thank Brigham for sharing his insights, definitely his expertise on contrarian business practices that work. You've got an innovative approach to entrepreneurship. I love how you started off. I love how you grew it. It's truly inspiring. There's a lot to learn in this episode. So I hope people not only listen to it, but maybe repeat it and listen to it again, because you dropped a lot of gold nuggets along the way. Sometimes it's like watching a good movie, right? You got to watch it a second time and you're like, oh, I missed that one the first time. I think this is one of those episodes.
Thanks, Scott.
So listen, everybody out there, if you are ready to revolutionize your approach to business and embrace change as the ultimate superpower, go ahead and check him out. Hello Sugar franchise. Google that. You'll find information out on that. But as always, don't forget to visit meplusultra.com for more exclusive content, resources, and opportunities to take your business to the next level. Until next time, keep innovating, keep challenging the status quo, and keep embracing the unconventional. Cheers.